12-team bracket for the college football playoff is here, and today we're going to go over it all as tomorrow night we have Alabama, the number 9 seed, taking on Oklahoma, the number 8 seed in Norman in a rematch from a game that took place in Tuscaloosa earlier this year where Oklahoma and Brent Venables' defense got after Ty Simpson in Alabama. I do not think Ty Simpson is quite ready for the NFL. I think Brent Venables and that Oklahoma team has a legit attitude. They play very well. They run the football. They're complimentary. They're very physical. Again, I think it may be hard for Alabama to lose twice, but they've been leaking oil offensively. Ty Simpson got beat up by that Georgia team in the SEC championship. We'll see if Kalen DeVore can, with a couple weeks off, scheme some things up, get Ryan Williams open, run the football, and keep the game close. I do think if the game is close, advantage Alabama, but I think Oklahoma is going to win here by about 10 points. I just think they are overall the better football team this year. Now, for JMU and Oregon and for Tulane and Ole Miss, I'm going to be honest, I don't care. I don't think either of those two teams have a shot. I think Oregon will move on to take on Texas Tech, and I think Ole Miss will move on to face Georgia. I think the most interesting first round matchup could be Miami and Texas A&M. Miami with Carson Beck, who is a transfer from Georgia. What a story that would be if he could win two playoff games, which would include one against Ohio State on New Year's Eve to play his former team, Georgia, in the semifinals if Georgia were to move on against Ole Miss, which I, by the way, do predict that they will. Um, I've said it. I think going into this college football playoff, I think we're going to have some good games. Try to think Alabama, Oklahoma is going to be a good game. I think Miami, Florida, Texas A&M is going to be a good game. It does not excuse the fact that the committee, the way they rank this, is wrong. Tulane and James Madison getting in over Notre Dame and BYU to me is wrong. If we're going to debate the best teams in the college football playoff, instead of just picking conferences, we might as well go to 16. The fact that Wayne Kiffin is not coaching Ole Miss anymore throws action into things. Obviously, Brian Hartline is leaving Ohio State. There's other coordinators leaving other places as well, which just makes these playoffs really hard to predict. Are these coaches going to be as focused? It's like in the NFL when these guys in the divisional round are getting interviewed for head coaching opportunities. It does feel like their focus may be a little bit more away from their current job, which could affect outcome of playoff games. So, with all that being said, I think the semifinal is going to be Oregon against Texas Tech. I think Oklahoma against Indiana, Ole Miss against Georgia, and I think our one upset, if we're going to get one, is going to be Carson Beck playing well. Mario Cristobal, that Miami Florida team, taking it physically to that Texas A&M team who was ranked in the top three for a while, have not played well for the last month. I think they're a little bit overrated myself in the SEC. So I'm going to take Ohio State then to beat Miami, Florida. Again, I think Miami's a nice story, but I think Matt Patricia's defense is going to do enough against Carson Beck. I think Miami may get a little bit of pressure on that Ohio State offensive line, but not enough to affect the playmakers there with Cardell Tate and Jeremiah Smith and the running game with Bo Jackson and Peoples. And I think that Ole Miss, they're going to get basically a bye win against Tulane and Georgia just because Ole Miss does not have Wayne Kiffin anymore. They're not going to be focused. Georgia's going to be off a bye. I think Gunnar Stockton plays well. And I think our one semifinal matchup will be basically the national championship, in my opinion, between Ohio State and Georgia. And I say that because I think Indiana could win the national championship. But I also think that Oklahoma is a bad matchup for Indiana. That pressure they bring, Fernando Mendoza, a team that he's really never played. Brent Venables is a veteran defensive coordinator. He's been through the college football playoff with Dabo Swinney at Clemson. We saw Oregon last year win the Big Ten title game against Penn State, get a bye, and in this spot, take on a number 8 Ohio State team who was struggling after the Michigan game. They go in, they rout Tennessee, and then they rout Oregon here in this spot. I think it could be very similar things that could happen to Indiana as Oklahoma routs them potentially. I think it could be a 27-10 type ball game where Fernando Mendoza struggles. Even though I do like Fernando Mendoza's intangibles, I mean, let's face it, that Indiana game was 13-10. That defense is going to have to shut down Oklahoma. I am not sure if they can do that on a consistent basis. So I'm going to take Oklahoma to advance, and I just think that Texas Tech and the Big 12, they're not going to be man enough to go against Dan Lanning and that Oregon offensive line. I think Dante Moore is going to be comfortable throwing the football. I think they'll be able to push Texas Tech around. And so my final four is number five, Oregon against number eight, Oklahoma, and number two, Ohio State against number three, Georgia. At the top of the bracket, again, I think Oregon at this point, they're getting buys against JMU and Texas Tech. I think they got a favorable bracket where Oklahoma was hardened. They had to go through Alabama, they had to go through Indiana, and now I do think they will go through Oregon. I think Ohio State's defense is, in a 2017 game, the difference. I think Jeremiah Smith makes one more play down the field than the Georgia skill makers. I think it's a very close, very much like Indiana, a defensive scoring, feel it out type of game. But I think Ohio State, their championship pedigree, goes through. And I do have Ohio State taking on Oklahoma. And I think, again, Ohio State is just too explosive. And I think that the Ohio State Buckeyes, for the second straight year, as I've been saying since the start of the college football season, after week one, when they beat Texas, I said originally, I'm not sure how Matt Patricia is going to transition to the NFL. I need to see Julian saying I'm not so sure they can repeat. But ever since I watched them play against Texas, I said, oh, they are still the fastest team in football. They still are maybe the most explosive team in college football. I said, I think this team, from every team I saw this year, or LSU and, Indiana and Texas and Notre Dame and Georgia were all ranked high. I said, I thought Ohio State was the fastest team I saw in college football. They have dudes. Again, I think Indiana may be close, but they may be in a trap. I think we're either going to get, I think the winner of that Indiana Oklahoma game moves on to play the winner of Ohio State Georgia, is the way I look at it. I think those are your four potential national champions in this bracket. Is Indiana, Oklahoma, Georgia, or Ohio State? My prediction is that the national championship is going to be Ohio State over Oklahoma. Let me know if you feel differently below. Like that clip from the Brand's World podcast? If so, make sure you go down there and hit that subscribe button. While you're down there hitting the subscribe button, make sure to also hit the notification bell so you never miss another upload. And make sure you check out all the other clips from the Brand's World podcast right here on YouTube.